In the early 19th century, there was a volcano in Indonesia that had been quiet for a long time. It didn't smoke often, nor did it frequently cause earthquakes. So for the people living nearby, it just looked like an ordinary mountain. But underneath what they thought was just a mountain, something was happening that they couldn't see. This volcano was Tambora. In April of 1815, it suddenly erupted in a way that the modern world had almost never experienced before.
Nearly 200 years ago, on a remote island in Indonesia, Tambora, the country's tallest mountain, exploded, killing 120,000 people.
According to historians and scientific records, the eruption was so powerful that its sound reached places more than 1,000 kilometers away. Many people at that time thought there was a war or large cannons firing in the distance. But it wasn't just the loudness of the sound that was frightening. The volcano spewed a huge amount of ash, rocks, and smoke up into the atmosphere. Because of this, even the Earth's climate changed in the following year. According to studies by scientists and historians, the temperature dropped in some places. And in other parts of the world, there was winter, even during the summer season in some countries. Crops were also destroyed, famine occurred, and many people were affected, even thousands of kilometers away from Indonesia. That's why, until now, the Tambora eruption is considered one of the most destructive volcanic eruptions in recorded history. But before we start the discussion, I would just like to ask you for a like and please subscribe to our channel. This is a huge help for us content creators. So, let's get started. Mount Tambora is located on the island of Sumbawa in Indonesia. It is part of what is called the Pacific Ring of Fire. It's a vast area around the Pacific Ocean where many active volcanoes and frequent earthquakes can be found. The reason why there are many volcanoes here is simple. Beneath the earth, there are huge slabs of rock called tectonic plates. They move slowly. In this part of Indonesia, some of these plates push against and collide with each other. So when one plate pushes down beneath another, some parts of it melt because of the intense heat beneath the earth. When the rock melts, it becomes magma, and over time, the magma accumulates beneath the volcano. And as it increases, the pressure inside also rises. It's like a pressure cooker that keeps getting hotter. When the mountain can no longer handle the excessive pressure, that's when an eruption happens. And that's exactly what happened to Tambora. Before the eruption in 1815, the volcano had been quiet for a long time. It might have had no major activity for hundreds of years, so many people back then were no longer afraid of it. According to studies using carbon dating, the mountain is estimated to have existed for more than 50,000 years. During that time, it was one of the tallest mountains in the region. Its height reached approximately 4,300 meters before the major eruption occurred. But beneath the mountain, there was a large magma chamber that was gradually filling up. As more magma accumulated, the heat and pressure inside the earth also increased. According to scientific estimates, the temperature beneath the volcano could exceed 800 degrees Celsius. And because the magma chamber of Tambora was shallower compared to other volcanoes, the pressure built up more quickly. To make it easier to understand, imagine a bottle of soda that has been shaken for a long time without being opened. The pressure builds up inside, but when you suddenly open it, you'll see a strong explosion. That's what happened with Tambora, but millions of times stronger. In the early 1800s, there were kingdoms and small sultanates on the island of Sumbawa. One of them was the Kingdom of Tambora, which was located right around the volcano. Thousands of people lived there back then. The place was known for agriculture, trade, and natural resources. The soil near volcanoes is fertile. So even though it's dangerous, many people still live near it because volcanic soil is good for farming. But while life was normal for the people around Tambora, the situation under the mountain was gradually getting worse. They didn't know that a huge disaster was already waiting. And by April 1815, one of the most powerful volcanoes ever witnessed by mankind finally erupted. Before Mount Tambora finally erupted, it didn't happen all at once in a single day. There were warnings first. In 1812, the volcano began to awaken after a very long period of silence. There were mild tremors, smoke and steam coming out from its crater, and from time to time dark clouds would rise from the top of the mountain. But at that time, there was no modern equipment like what scientists use today. There were no sensors that could monitor the movement of magma. There was no warning system to tell people when they needed to leave. So for the people living around Tambora, the smoke and tremors may have just become a part of daily life. This is what happened. For many years, the mountain was quiet on the surface, but underneath, heat, gas, and molten rock continued to build up. As the pressure couldn't escape, it grew even stronger. Imagine a pot with a lid. As the water boils inside, the steam builds up. When the steam can't escape, it pushes harder against the lid. If the lid can't hold it anymore, it suddenly bursts upward. That's basically what happened with Tambora. According to scientific records, the major eruption of Tambora began on April 5, 1815. In its early stages, there were tremors and eruptions of volcanic material. But the more intense explosion came a few days later, on the night of April 10, 1815. Before that, something was blocking the magma's path inside the volcano. This old magma had become thick and solid over time. It acted like a cap that blocked the opening beneath the mountain. Because of this, the pressure couldn't escape easily. As time passed, the gas and magma inside became more trapped. It got hotter, and the force became stronger. And when the volcano could no longer handle it, the barrier suddenly gave way. That's when the real danger began. The magma and volcanic gas rose powerfully from beneath the mountain. This wasn't just ordinary smoke. It was a sudden burst of extremely hot ash, rocks, and pressure from inside the earth. So when Tambora erupted, it wasn't just heard like an ordinary sound. It's more accurate to think of it as a shock wave. A normal sound, even if it's loud, is like a wave of air passing through. But a shock wave is much more violent. It's like a sudden blow to the air. When it passes through, it quickly pushes and disturbs everything around it. To make it easier to understand, think of water in a bucket. If you blow on the surface, you'll just get a small wave. But if you drop a big stone into it, the water will suddenly splash in all directions. That's the difference between a normal sound and a shock wave. With Tambora, the explosion was so powerful that the pressure from the volcano spread through the air over a great distance. According to historical accounts used by researchers, the explosion was heard in distant places, and some people thought it was cannon fire or a war. But what's even scarier is that this first powerful explosion wasn't even the strongest one. It was just a warning. Underneath the mountain, an even greater force was waiting, and as the magma passage continued to open, the biggest eruption was approaching, one that would change not just Sumbawa, but the climate of the entire world. When the powerful eruptions of Tambora began in April 1815, people quickly realized that this was no ordinary eruption. The pressure released by the volcano was so intense that it felt like the air itself was struck by an enormous force. According to studies by volcanologists, the shock wave from Tambora was one of the strongest atmospheric blasts ever recorded in history. To put it simply, the eruption wasn't just loud. It violently pushed the air outward in all directions. Because of this, there were places very far from Tambora that still heard the loud explosion. In some towns and islands, people thought there was a war or that large cannons were being fired at sea. There were even soldiers sent at that time to check if there was an attack or if a ship was in danger, because they thought it was the sound of a battle. But as time passed, it gradually became clear that it wasn't a war. It turned out to be a massive volcanic eruption. What's surprising is that Tambora didn't just erupt once. It repeatedly unleashed powerful explosions over several days. Each new eruption came with new pressure from beneath the earth. This is what happened inside the mountain. Even after the magma pathway was opened during the first eruption, a huge amount of magma and volcanic gas still remained below. New magma continues to rise from deeper parts of the earth. That's why it seems like the volcano never runs out of force. As long as new magma and gas keep coming in, new eruptions will continue to happen. And with every eruption, more ash and rocks are thrown upward. According to historical accounts, there were places more than 1,000 kilometers away, but the rumble of the eruption could still be heard. There are even some reports that faint sounds possibly reached farther parts of Southeast Asia. This just shows how massive the energy released by Tambora was. But while people were busy listening to the explosions and rumblings of the volcano, a much bigger problem was coming with the ash. After the initial powerful eruptions, a huge amount of volcanic ash began to spread in the air. This was not just ordinary dust. Volcanic ash is made up of tiny fragments of rock, glass, and minerals that are extremely fine. When inhaled, it is dangerous to both people and animals. It can destroy crops, contaminate water, and cause severe difficulty in breathing. The day after the first major blast, ash began to fall in areas far from Tambora. The sky was gradually covered by gray smoke. In some parts of Indonesia, even at noon it seemed like nighttime because of the thick ash in the atmosphere. According to historical records, in some places the sun was almost no longer visible. The once bright sky turned dark and became a yellowish-gray haze. While this was happening, the rumbling of the volcano continued in the distance. It was like an endless roll of thunder coming from beneath the earth. Thick ash slowly accumulated on houses, roads, and fields. At first, some people even thought that the ashfall might have special or medicinal effects. But as time went on, it became clear that this was a huge disaster. The ash grew thicker each day. The surroundings became darker. And as the wind carried the volcanic ash westward, islands like Java and Bali were affected even more severely. Within just a few days, the entire environment around Tambora began to change. And that wasn't even the most intense part of the eruption. By April 10, 1815, the area around Tambora looked almost like hell. On the nearby islands, the ground was already covered with thick ash. In some places, the ash was almost impossible to see through. Even at noon, what used to be normal life was replaced by darkness, smoke, and the constant rumbling from the volcano. But even with the situation that bad, that still wasn't the most dangerous part of the eruption. That night, Tambora entered what scientists call the Plinian stage. This is the most violent and destructive part of a volcanic eruption. This is where continuous and extremely powerful explosions occur, capable of throwing massive amounts of ash, rocks, and gas high up into the atmosphere. To make it easier to understand, imagine a pressure cooker that doesn't just explode. It's like millions of tons of hot rocks and gas were suddenly pushed upward by the entire mountain. By evening, Tambora began to emit massive eruption columns. According to studies, these reached almost 40 kilometers up into the atmosphere. That's extremely high. It's even higher than the normal flight altitude of most airplanes today. As the thick cloud of ash rose higher, hot volcanic rocks and pumice began to fall from the sky. Pumice is a light but hard volcanic rock that forms when gas-rich magma cools rapidly. In some places, the rocks falling from the sky were said to be as big as a person's fist. As the night grew deeper, the eruption became even more violent. According to historical eyewitness accounts, the whole mountain seemed to be blazing. Its summit was spewing fire, ash, and thick black smoke in different directions. In simple terms, it was as if the ground itself was exploding. After this, extremely thick volcanic ash began to fall on the villages surrounding Tambora. Houses, trees, fields, and roads were gradually buried. But something even more terrifying came: the pyroclastic flow. This is one of the deadliest parts of a volcanic eruption. The pyroclastic flow is a very fast avalanche of extremely hot ash, rocks, and poisonous gas that rushes down from the volcano. This is not ordinary smoke. It's like a giant cloud of fire and ash that rapidly sweeps down the mountain. It's extremely hot and moves so fast that it's almost impossible to escape if you're near the volcano. According to scientific estimates, the temperature of a pyroclastic flow can reach up to 100 degrees Celsius. It's so hot that it can instantly burn almost anything in its path. And on that night, the massive eruption column of Tambora collapsed. This happened because the ash and debris in the air became so heavy that they fell back to the ground. That's when the massive pyroclastic flows began. Next, the burning ash and gas rushed down the mountain. It swallowed the villages and kingdoms around Tambora. The once prosperous kingdom of Tambora was almost wiped off the map. According to archaeological excavations carried out many years later, houses were found buried under thick volcanic deposits. Some human skeletons were also found inside the houses. This shows how quickly the tragedy happened. Many people probably had no chance to escape. It wasn't just buildings that were lost. A large part of the culture and history of the people who lived there was also lost. According to historians, they had their own language that was different from those in nearby areas. But after the eruption, it almost completely disappeared, along with their community itself. And while the pyroclastic flows were destroying the area around Tambora, the volcano continued its relentless eruption throughout the night. The entire island was slowly turning into a massive disaster zone. While the pyroclastic flows continued to destroy the area around Tambora, another dangerous effect began to be felt in the region. When the extremely hot ash, rocks, and volcanic debris rushed down to the coast, a large portion of it fell into the water, causing a tsunami. It wasn't as big as the largest tsunamis in history, but it was enough to cause panic and additional destruction to the nearby coasts. In some areas near the sea, the water suddenly rose and quickly receded after a few minutes. At the same time, powerful eruptions from the volcano continued. According to historical records from that time, it was so dark on some islands that people had to light candles, even though it was only afternoon. The sun could no longer be seen clearly. The thick ash in the sky blocked the light. To put it simply, it was as if a giant cloud of dust covered the entire sky. And as time went on, the ashfall became even thicker. Little by little, the trees, houses, fields, and rivers were covered. The once green surroundings turned the color of dust, and there was almost no sign of life. According to eyewitness accounts, there were places where it didn't feel like a normal day even in the morning. It was like a permanent night. After the strongest eruptions on April 10, Tambora did not stop right away. In the weeks and months that followed, it continued to rumble and release ash and smoke, even though it was gradually weakening. Around the middle of 1815, that's when the intense activity of the volcano finally began to subside. But even though the eruption had weakened, it had already left behind massive destruction. According to studies by historians and volcanologists, almost all the vegetation in a large part of Sumbawa was destroyed. Many forests were buried in ash. Many rivers and coastlines changed their appearance, and Mount Tambora itself became smaller after the eruption. Before the disaster, its height was estimated to be over 4,000 meters. But because of the massive explosion and the collapse of its peak, the mountain's height decreased significantly. This just shows how much of the mountain literally exploded and disappeared. There was another problem that made things even harder for the survivors. Ships could hardly approach the area around Tambora because of the thick volcanic debris in the sea. Many parts of the ocean back then were covered with floating pumice and ash. Because of this, it was difficult for help and supplies to arrive. And as time went on, the more severe effects of the eruption began to be felt. Hunger, sickness, and lack of food and clean water. Many crops were destroyed because of the thick ash. Many animals died, and in some places people could hardly harvest anything. According to historians' estimates, thousands of people died immediately because of the eruption itself, pyroclastic flows, and ashfall. But even more people died in the following months due to hunger, disease, and the collapse of normal life in the region. And in total, it is estimated that more than 100,000 people were affected or died because of the effects of the Tambora eruption and the climate disaster that followed. But even though the tragedy in Indonesia was that massive, the truth is it wasn't just Southeast Asia that was affected by Tambora. The effects of the ash and sulfur it released into the atmosphere were also slowly spreading throughout the world. And in the following months, the Earth would begin to experience a strange period that would be called the year without a summer. In modern times, scientists now use a scale called the Volcanic Explosivity Index, or VEI, to measure how large an eruption is. The higher the number, the stronger and more dangerous the eruption. For example, VEI 5 eruptions, are already large and can spew out a huge amount of ash and rocks. But according to volcanologists, the eruption of Tambora in 1815 reached VE7. This means it is among the largest volcanic eruptions in recorded human history. To put it simply, it wasn't just a mountain that erupted. It was as if a huge part of the Earth was literally blown upwards. According to scientific estimates, hundreds of cubic kilometers of ash, rock, gas, and volcanic material were released by Tambora into the atmosphere. And this is where the effects that the world didn't expect began. The ash and sulfur from the eruption didn't just stay in Indonesia. It rose very high into the atmosphere and slowly spread to different parts of the world. Because of this, the amount of sunlight reaching the surface of the planet was reduced. To make it easier to understand, think of the smoke from a huge fire. When the smoke is thick, the light that passes through becomes weaker. The same thing happened to Earth after the Tambora eruption, but on a much larger scale. The following year, different countries began to experience unusual climate changes. The temperature dropped, the weather became colder, and in some places there was even snow and frost, even though it was supposed to be summer. In the United States, Europe, and some parts of Asia, many crops were damaged because of the extreme cold and unpredictable weather. There were places that experienced frost even during the summer months. Some fields did not bear fruit anymore. Some farmers lost their harvest. And because of this, a severe food shortage began. According to historical records, there was famine, an increase in food prices, and a rise in diseases in different countries. At that time, most people didn't know that everything was connected to a volcano in Indonesia. Back then, it wasn't fully understood how major eruptions could affect the climate of the entire world. But now, it's clear to scientists that the sulfur and volcanic particles from Tambora were one of the main reasons for the unusual climate disaster in 1816. Many countries struggled with cold weather and crop failures, and the eruption also impacted culture and history. That's it. The events that influenced artists and writers during that time, according to historians, the unusual gloomy weather after the Tambora eruption became part of the inspiration for some famous horror stories in the 19th century, including Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. In China, the extreme cold and food shortages also affected the lives of many people, and even appeared in some traditional writings and poems during that time. But despite all those cultural effects, the greatest impact was still the loss of so many lives. Not only those who died directly from the eruption were victims. Many also died because of hunger, disease, and the climate disaster that followed after the eruption. And until now, scientists and historians still consider the Tambora eruption as one of the most dangerous natural disasters in modern human history. It didn't just destroy an island, it changed the climate of the entire planet, changed the lives of millions of people, and showed how small and weak humans are when the true force of nature is unleashed. In more than 200 years since the Tambora eruption happened, no other volcanic eruption has reached the same scale. And that's the reason why even today scientists all over the world continue to study it. Because Tambora reminds us that even if a mountain is quiet for hundreds of years, it doesn't mean there is no danger hidden beneath it.